The ring is a temple, the mat is sacred, and for the last decade, there has been one high priest of violence who has enforced the law with an iron fist. But tonight on Monday Night Raw, the temple didn't just shake, it saw a god bleed. Welcome back to Wrestling Apocalypse, the only place on the internet where we don't just report the headlines, we survive the carnage. If you thought the hierarchy of the WWE was set in stone, I need you to drop everything and lean in, because the tectonic plates of the industry just shifted with a violence that has left the medical staff in a state of absolute panic. We are talking about a collision that shouldn't have happened for another 3 years, a clash of two generational monsters that was supposed to be a dream match tucked away for a WrestleMania main event in the distant future. But tonight, that future arrived early, it arrived unannounced, and it didn't come with a handshake. It came with the sound of cracking ribs and the sight of a king being brought to his knees. We are talking about the ring general, Gunther, and his systematic, brutal, and absolutely soul-crushing attack on the man they call the ruler, Oba Femi. The atmosphere in the arena tonight was suffocating. You could feel the humidity of the tension rising from the moment the show went on the air. Oba Femi, a man who has treated the entire roster like a collection of disposable toys, had just finished another dominant display of power. He stood in the center of the ring, dripping with sweat, looking less like a wrestler and more like a statue carved out of obsidian, untouchable, unbeatable, and entirely aware of his own myth. He grabbed the microphone, and with that deep, resonant voice that commands silence from the rafters, he began to talk about his inevitable ascent. He called himself the true ruler of the vertical world, claiming that no man on Raw, no man on SmackDown, and certainly no one left in NXT possessed the combination of power and pedigree to even breathe his air. He was mocking the very idea of a legend, claiming he had surpassed the greats before even hitting his prime. But then, the air in the building turned ice cold. That familiar, ominous orchestral swell of the New World Symphony hit the speakers, and for the first time in his career, we saw a flicker, just a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of something resembling recognition in the eyes of Oba Femi. Out stepped Gunther. No Imperium, no Ludwig Kaiser, no distractions. Just the ring general, draped in that long, crimson-lined coat, looking like a man who had just walked out of a high-stakes war room. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He marched down that ramp with a terrifying, rhythmic precision that felt like a countdown to an execution. The crowd went from a roar to a haunting, vibrating silence. This wasn't a fun wrestling moment. This felt like a crime was about to be committed in broad daylight. When Gunther stepped into that ring, he didn't even wait for Oba to finish his sentence. He didn't wait for a bell. He walked right into Oba's personal space, nose to nose, and for a solid 60 seconds, the two most physically imposing men in the industry stood there like two titans from a forgotten myth. The first strike was the one they'll be studying in the Performance Center for decades. Gunther delivered a chop that didn't just sound like a gunshot, it sounded like a tree snapping in a Category 5 hurricane. It hit Oba Femi square in the chest, and the shockwave was so powerful you could see the ripples in Oba's skin on the high-def cameras. But here's the unbelievable part, Oba didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. He just looked down at his chest, where a purple welt was already beginning to bloom like a dark flower, and he smiled. It was a smile that promised a level of violence that Monday nights aren't usually allowed to broadcast. What followed was 12 minutes of the most uncomfortable, high-stakes physical dialogue we have ever seen. This wasn't a technical masterpiece in the traditional sense, it was a demolition derby of the human spirit. Oba Femi caught Gunther with a forearm that sent the ring general reeling into the ropes, a sight we haven't seen since the wars with Sheamus or Drew McIntyre. Oba then hoisted Gunther up all 250-plus pounds of Austrian muscle and held him in a vertical suplex for a staggering 20 seconds. You could see the blood rushing to Gunther's head, the sheer defiance of the ruler showing the world that the mat might be sacred, but the empire now belongs to him. But Gunther is a predator who thrives on the endurance of pain. He is a man who treats a broken rib as a minor inconvenience and a bleeding eye as a badge of honor. As Oba went for a massive powerbomb, Gunther slipped behind him and began a systematic dismantling of Oba's foundation. He targeted the knees with those devastating, low-trajectory kicks, each one sounding like a whip crack against a side of beef. He locked in a sleeper hold that turned Oba's face a dark, terrifying shade of crimson. The commentary team was losing their minds. Michael Cole was screaming about the collision of worlds, and Wade Barrett was genuinely concerned that the ring wouldn't hold up under the combined mass of these two absolute units. The turning point, the moment that will be replayed until the tape wears thin, came when Oba Femi attempted to throw Gunther over the top rope with a sheer force toss. Gunther clung to the ropes like a man possessed, pulled himself back in, and delivered a trio of powerbombs that actually caused the ring to sag in the center. The third one was the killer. Gunther didn't just drop him, he drove him through the canvas. And as Oba lay there, gasping for air, the ruler finally looked human. He looked vulnerable. Gunther didn't go for a pin. He didn't want a 3 count. He wanted a message. He grabbed Oba by the chin, forced him to look at the lights, and whispered something into his ear, a secret, a threat, a prophecy that made the big man's eyes widen in genuine shock before Gunther delivered one final, devastating lariat that turned Oba Femi inside out. Backstage, the fallout was instantaneous. We are hearing reports from our sources that the locker room was dead silent as the ruler was helped to the back by a team of 6 officials. The mood was somber, almost like a wake. Our sources say that Oba Femi was coughing up blood and had to be rushed to a local medical facility for what is feared to be a collapsed lung or internal bruising. But the real story is Gunther's demeanor after the fact. He didn't celebrate. He didn't raise his arms to the crowd. He simply straightened his coat, wiped a smear of Oba's blood off his cheek, and walked away. The king had been deposed, not by a rebellion, but by a superior force of nature that reminded everyone who the real apex predator of Raw truly is. The fan perspective on social media has been absolutely polarized. One half of the WWE universe is mourning the end of Oba Femi's unbeatable aura, feeling like a promising young star was fed to the lions too early. But the other half? They're celebrating the return of the old Gunther, the man who doesn't care about titles, doesn't care about merch sales, and doesn't care about the ruler persona. They saw a man who reclaimed his territory with a brutality that felt personal. People are calling it the end of the ruler era, and quite frankly, it's hard to argue with them after seeing a man of Oba's size being handled like a sparring partner. Think about the psychological toll here. Oba Femi has spent his entire career, from the collegiate ranks to the main roster, being the strongest man in every room he walks into. Tonight, he walked into a room with the ring general and realized that strength is nothing compared to the cold, calculated cruelty of a master. The question now isn't just when is the rematch, it's can Oba Femi ever be the same? How do you recover from being dismantled in front of millions of people by a man who didn't even look like he broke a sweat? How do you call yourself a ruler when you've been made to look like a subject? This is the drama that keeps us glued to the screen. This is the apocalypse we've been warning you about. The power structure of Monday Night Raw has been incinerated. With the ruler neutralized, Gunther has reclaimed his spot as the ultimate gatekeeper of the industry. If you want to reach the top, if you want to be the champion, if you want to be the next big thing, you now have to go through the man who just broke the most powerful athlete in the company without blinking an eye. We're going to be tracking every update on Oba Femi's condition. We've got people stationed at the hospital, we're monitoring the internal medical reports, and we're trying to get a statement from the Imperium camp to see if this was an unsanctioned hit or a planned takeover. This is a moment that will define the rest of 2026. The sacred mat has been washed in the blood of a king, and the ring general is standing tall over the ruins. But I want to know what you saw. Did you see a fluke, or did you see the definitive proof that Gunther is the greatest of all time? Is Oba Femi's career in jeopardy after that level of physical trauma, or will he rise from the ashes as a more dangerous, more humble monster? The Wrestling Apocalypse community is where the real analysis happens, so get down in the comments right now and let your voice be heard. I'm reading every single theory, and I want to know if you think Gunther went too far or if this was exactly what Oba Femi needed to truly become a legend. If you're as stunned as we are, hit that like button to support the channel. It helps us keep digging into these shadows and bringing you the truth behind the curtain. Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update when the world of wrestling catches fire. The ruler has fallen, the general has risen, and the apocalypse is just getting started. I've been your host for Wrestling Apocalypse. Stay safe, stay loud, and we'll see you at the next bell.